Welcome back to Unpacking the Backpack, everybody, where we unpack the mindsets, strategies, and pedagogy needed to transform learning in a rapidly changing world. As always, I'm your host, Eric Scheniger. If you've been paying attention to the news, scroll through, education forums or talk to parents at district board meetings, there's a massive storm brewing. We are living through an unprecedented backlash against educational technology. From cell phone bans in high schools and district wide screen time limits to fierce debates over artificial intelligence, algorithmic learning, and digital distractions, the pendulum has swung violently. Critics are shouting from the rooftops. Tech in schools is a failure. Kids can't focus. Screens are ruining education. And you know what? If you look at how technology has traditionally been dumped into classrooms without vision, without professional learning, and without sound pedagogy, the critics aren't entirely wrong. When schools simply buy thousands of Chromebooks or iPads and say, "Here, go innovate," or when we replace active collaborative learning with passive digital worksheets, we fail. That isn't transformation. That's just high-tech compliance. Novelty is not the transformation. So how do we respond? Do we retreat into the past? Throw out the devices and pretend the digital world doesn't exist? Absolutely not. We can ill afford to prepare our students for a world that no longer exists. The answer to the EdTech backlash isn't to ban the technology. The answer is digital leadership, something I've been writing about since 2010. In today's episode, we are going to unpack why technology alone was never meant to be the savior of education, how the framework from my book, Digital Leadership, provides the exact blueprint that we needed in the past, but that we need now to navigate this backlash, and why now, more than ever, we must shift our focus from the devices in our hands to the pedagogy in our minds. Let's dig in. To understand why digital leadership is the cure, we first have to diagnose the disease. Why are parents, teachers, and policymakers so frustrated with EdTech right now? For over a decade, the narrative around EdTech was driven by shiny object syndrome. Vendors promised that adaptive software would solve learning gaps, that one-to-one device initiatives would magically boost test scores, and more recently, that AI would revolutionize the classroom overnight. But as I've written extensively on my blog, A Principal's Reflections, technology will not revolutionize education. Educators who effectively integrate technology to enhance and support learning will. The current backlash is a direct result of a fundamental misunderstanding. Treating technology as an end in itself rather than a means to an end. When tech integration is shallow, it creates three major pain points. Number one, digital substitution over pedagogical transformation. We took paper worksheets and turned them into PDFs. We took lectures and put them on video. That's not digital learning. That's just digitizing traditional passive instruction. Number two, the illusion of engagement. We confused busy work on a device with true cognitive engagement. Just because a student is staring at a screen, playing a gamified quiz, doesn't mean deep, meaningful learning is taking place. Engagement without rigor and observable evidence of learning is just a distraction. Number three, the human disconnect. In our rush to go high tech, too many schools forgot to stay high touch. When technology isolates students, rather than facilitating collaboration, community, and human connection, of course parents and teachers are going to revolt. This brings us to a hard truth I frequently share with leaders across the globe. Tools change, but sound leadership and pedagogy remain constant. The technology was never the problem. The lack of a strategic, human-centered leadership framework behind the technology was the problem. And that, my friends, is where the pillars of digital leadership come into play. If you've read my book, Digital Leadership: Changing Paradigms for Changing Times, you know that I define digital leadership not as a title, an add-on, or one more thing to do. Digital leadership is a strategic mindset and set of behaviors that leverage resources to create a meaningful, transparent, and engaging school culture. It's about doing what we already do better. It's about working smarter, not harder, by enhancing our professional practice through the intentional, purposeful, strategic use of technology. Most importantly, digital leadership is not reserved for superintendents or principals. Anyone can lead where they are. Teacher leaders, instructional coaches, tech integrationists, everyone has the capacity to model what right looks like. When the EdTech backlash hits your district, a traditional leader panics, bans the tools, or retreats to status quo practices. But a digital leader looks at the backlash and says, the critics are highlighting a gap in our implementation. Let's address the mindset, refine the pedagogy, and leverage our framework to show true efficacy. Let's break down how the pillars of digital leadership directly answer the core complaints of the EdTech backlash. So, when we look at three critical areas where digital leadership directly solves the problems causing the EdTech uproar, those three are student learning and pedagogy, communication and storytelling, and professional growth. So when we look at number one, student engagement and learning, it's a shift from learning from tech to learning with tech. The biggest critique from parents right now is screen time. They see their kids sitting passively in front of laptops for hours. In digital leadership, I emphasize that technology must be used to facilitate high-quality teaching. On my blog, I often write about the distinction between blended instruction and blended learning. Blended instruction is what the teacher does with tech. Blended learning is where students use tech to gain control over the path, place, and pace of their learning, driving choice, ownership, and autonomy. Digital leaders counter the EdTech backlash by demanding observable evidence of learning. We don't use tech to keep kids quiet. We use tech to give them a voice. We move students from passive consumers of content to active creators, problem solvers, and contributors. When tech is used to connect kids to real-world tasks, authentic audiences, and collaborative projects, the screen time argument evaporates because the learning becomes undeniable. Take generative AI, for example, the newest frontier of the EdTech debate. The reaction from many was an immediate ban it brigade. But as I noted in a recent blog post on AI-assisted pedagogical leadership, the goal isn't to ban AI or let it run wild. The goal is to move from learning from AI to learning with AI as a feedback-driven partner while keeping the human element, empathy, and relationships at the absolute center of the classroom. Number two, looking at the pillars of public relations and branding, becoming the storyteller in chief is important so much now. Why is the EdTech backlash so loud? Because negative narratives fill information vacuums. If you haven't or aren't telling your school's story, someone else will tell it for you. And usually, it won't be positive. That's why one of the core pillars in my book is public relations and branding. Digital leaders act as a storyteller in chief. When parents are worried that devices are ruining classrooms, it's usually because they don't see what positive, powerful tech integration actually looks like. Digital leaders use transparent, modern communication channels to showcase real evidence of student learning. Show the video of students using tech to interview experts globally. Share the podcast students are producing. Highlight how tech is helping teachers give real-time feedback. Also, share how students get insights immediately onto how they're learning. When you make the incredible human-centered learning in your school transparent, you build trust and combat skepticism before the backlash even reaches your front door. Now comes professional learning, culture over compliance. The final piece of the puzzle is how we support our educators. Why did so many EdTech initiatives flop? Because teachers were handed devices without continuous, meaningful, job-embedded professional growth. They were given one-and-done workshops on how to use a tool rather than ongoing coaching on how to transform pedagogy. The same can be said for our school leaders. And if school leaders were not trained on these aspects, how were they ever in a position to support their teachers? In digital leadership, I advocate for building robust personal learning networks, PLNs, and shifting from traditional professional development to active professional learning. Leaders must learn side by side with their teachers. We cannot ask our staff to take risks, innovate, and model new mindsets if we aren't doing it ourselves. When leaders model digital fluency, empathy, and continuous learning, we build a culture where teachers feel supported to use EdTech meaningfully, rather than feeling forced to use it for compliance. As we wrap up today's deep dive, I want to leave you with a concept that I've been reflecting on deeply in my recent writing, and that's the empathy paradox. As our educational environments become higher tech with algorithms, data dashboards, and AI, our leadership must become drastically more high touch. Technology can optimize processes, curate resources, and buy back precious minutes in our day. But technology cannot build trust. It cannot express genuine empathy. It cannot inspire a struggling student or support a burnt-out teacher. Digital leadership is not about replacing the human element. It's about amplifying it. When you use technology to automate administrative noise, you buy back time to walk the hallways, sit in classrooms, look teachers in the eye, and build meaningful relationships. Research consistently shows that when leaders are present, supported, and grounded in relationships, efficacy and job satisfaction skyrocket. The current backlash against EdTech is actually a massive opportunity. Again, an opportunity that I wrote about in detail beginning 16 years ago. But now it's a wake-up call, forcing the educational community to stop accepting mediocre, high-tech traditionalism. It's calling us to abandon the shiny objects and get back to what actually works: sound pedagogy, strong relationships, and strategic vision. So if you're feeling the pressure of the EdTech backlash in your school, your district, your classroom, don't throw away the tools. Instead, elevate your leadership. You elevate your leadership by shifting the focus from the device to the design of the learning experience, becoming the storyteller in chief to show your community the amazing things happening in classrooms. And you focus on relationships first, pedagogy second, and technology third. If you want to dive deeper into these strategies that are not new, everyone, please check out I wouldn't even say recent, but the last edition of Digital Leadership, which is available wherever books are sold. But you can also search my blog, You can read my latest thoughts, research, and reflections at escheninger.blogspot.com. I will put that link in the show notes. But you can also do a search on the top left, put in digital leadership, and you'll see that the map to efficacy was paved many, many, many years ago. And, it's up to us to change that narrative because our students depend on us. So as you think about, what are your thoughts on the EdTech backlash? How is your school navigating this shift? I'd love to hear your thoughts on social media. Whatever your tool of choice is, just use the hashtag DigiLead or leave a comment on this episode. So again, check out digital leadership. And again, I kind of feel bad that I'm heavily promoting my book where the first edition came out almost 16 years ago. But I'm telling you, everyone, when you look at the concepts in there, it really would have helped to eliminate a lot of what's happening right now. But we can use those concepts to put us on the path forward where tech becomes a support, an amplifier. It begins and ends, though, with that vision, but also support. When we think about professional learning, workshops, presentations, followed by job-embedded, ongoing coaching and feedback, so that we can really have our kids dive deep into standards, but then use technology in a purposeful way when appropriate to allow students to learn. In my book, I say these two things about technology. Number one, how are students using technology to learn in ways they couldn't without it? And number two, how does your use of technology represent a fundamental improvement over what you did without it? If we can't answer those questions, don't use tech. But those are the keys, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Unpacking the Backpack. Don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with colleagues who need to hear it today, especially those that are struggling with the EdTech backlash. Till next time, keep learning, keep modeling, keep leading from where you are, but most importantly, keep making a difference in the lives of kids.